I begin, Vinita. Should I begin?
Yeah, please start.
Good morning to everybody, all the participants. A very good morning to our guest, our speaker this morning, Kavitha Angre. She's the director of Paatashaala Learning Center at Bangalore. She's an educator, a counselor, a psychologist who has worked with over 600 children with disabilities over the past 24 years. She has a master's in child mental health and has been a part of several training programs for children with special needs conducted by institutes in England, Canada, amongst others. She is a recipient of the Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam Transformational Teacher Award in 2018. An avid reader and a learner still, as she says. She practices what I think all of us should be practicing, compassionate learning. And I would like to tell you, ma'am, that yesterday we had a special session on disabilities and sort of various categories of disabilities and a little bit of an introduction to this area. So I
All
think
right.
it works very well because today we will be talking. Your talk is titled, education for those with special needs.
Right.
So I don't want to take any more of your time. With this, I would, hand it over to you. And Ravinder, maybe you could play the PPT now.
Yes. Thank you.
Is it visible?
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is. It is. Thank you. Yeah.
Over to you.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. And like I said, you could speak for about an hour or so,
Yes.
and then we'll open it up for questions.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
Right. Yeah. Uh, Good morning, everyone. I'm sorry that I joined in late. I've been trying to be here by 10:20, 11:20. And yes, we had huge rains here. I live on the farm, so had some issues with the power. Okay, so what's this session going to be about? All right. So one of the things that I would like is this is going to be an interactive session. Why is the first question I'm going to ask. Next slide, please. So, yes, what is this session or what is this hour going to be about? And so why are we here? So what brings you here? Can I hear some of you on the chat, please? What brings you here?
Actually, the chat and their microphones are muted initially.
Okay, great.
So
All
we
right.
open up the chat box, say, about 45 minutes into the lecture, and
Right.
post
Okay.
their
Sure.
questions.
Okay. All right. Sure. So probably, when you ask yourself why you here and what brings you here, probably you will say, yeah, I want to know more about children. I want to know more about education. I want to know how do I, as a person, work with children with special needs, or how do I work? How do I come to know what is the need of this child? So, what brought me here is the question that I have been asking myself for many, many years. Next slide, please. Yeah. So, one of the things is the child learns to look, see the world. As soon as the child is born, there is bright light which hits the child. And slowly the child starts recognizing faces. And by 1 month, 1.5 months, starts looking and saying, this is, my parents. And the next slide, please. And the child has already been hearing. That's one of the reasons why as soon as the child comes, we put the child to the bosom and then ask, yeah. And that is one of the things. And the other thing is the child learns to touch. Yes, he reaches out and touches. Next slide, please. Child learns to crawl. Next slide, please. And child learns to walk. And the question I ask is, yeah, stop here, please. What is it that we do when all the most important milestones in development is done with so much enthusiasm? And what is it that we do that suddenly studies become boring or learning becomes such a big hassle? And that is the question that I've been asking for many, many years, asking myself for many years. And that's what brings me to this place. So the next is I would have had a great interaction, but I didn't realize there was a more of a lecture. So I will try to make the most of it by giving real life examples. And so the next is why? Why are we here today? And what is education, and why education, and why is this R being said that education with special needs is what we are looking at? So that being said, let me go back to where the slide is. Yes. And with this, the main reason is we are here because of the new education policy, the national education policy, which has come up. And the national education policy mainly looks in the special needs and for the children with disabilities. And these are the main things which have been addressed in children with disabilities. Next slide, please. Yeah. So according to this, yeah, the education policy is in tandem with something which we realized is a huge milestone in development. That is the RPWD Act of 2016. Children with benchmark disabilities shall have the choice of regular or special schooling. Most classrooms have children with specific learning disabilities who need continuous support. There was a study which was done, which showed that the children, there are more than around 30% of children in classrooms who have certain disabilities. Then the awareness and the knowledge of how to teach the kids with specific learning disabilities. When I did my course in B.Ed in special education, way back, there was the 2020, according to the Sarva Shikshan Abhiyan, which was coming. And there, one of the things which they mentioned was that henceforth, there is going to be inclusive education. Many of us, as special educators, said, my God, what are you going to do for my child? We have been working with so many children for so many years. How will this child go out in the open? And it was so beautiful, the kind of arguments that we had, the counter arguments. And then what happened was, that was where they said that inclusive education is the need of the day. And over the years of practice, this is one of the things that I have seen is the children do need inclusive education. With years of working with education, I still see that there is a lot that we are missing out, as in the way of inclusive education. And this are the main points which have come up, where there will be a teacher's training in the educational program. Next slide, please. Yes. So here also I will quote how the RPWD Act, the Rights of Persons with Disability Act, will be coming in. This is the Act of 2016. So according to this, the appropriate government and local authorities shall endeavor that all educational institutions funded or recognized by them shall provide inclusive education for children with disabilities. Here, I will give you an example of what happened when I went to a district here in Chamarajanagar. So just give me a minute. Yeah. So here in Karnataka, there is a district, one of the districts where I visited, and the people there said that one of the main issues, ma'am, here is that the PWD, that is persons with disability, and this particular department is the most neglected. One of the main reasons is because there is nothing much that they receive from here, and neither there is, the funding from the government is very less. And then they said, now with the RPWD Act of 2016, and before this, the previous act, where they said now the persons with disability can vote. So because of this came the rights of people with disability, and funding started coming more to this place. And when I went there, I saw that children were there in government schools. I saw children with different impairments. And one of the first things they did is, now 2016 has come in, children who had not gone to school for years, first time going to school, according to their level, according to their age, were in different classes. So that's one of the first things I saw. An 8th standard child back then probably did not know how to write the AAEE when I first went and did the assessments. So there was another child who had hearing impairment and did not, when I was saying something, I had to sit next to him and then, share. Now, the next slide, please. So exactly under the RPWD Act, there are different types which come in. One is blindness and low vision. I think you probably might have done this. We call it visual impairment right now. And the right word to use now is not call them blind. This person is blind or partially blind. We say this person has visual impairment, or partial visual impairment, or full visual impairment. Now, the same way, the deaf or hard of hearing, we call it for children as hearing impairment. Next is the locomotor disabilities. There are things like cerebral palsy, leprosy. These are all the things and all the education that you as teachers might have to provide for. Next is autism and intellectual disability, specific learning disability, and mental illness. The category D is what I have been working with many times. These are also the children that you will be working with as teachers. And right now, with the pandemic and online classes, these are also the children who are greatly suffering. There are children who call me up and tell me, when are you starting offline classes, ma'am? This is difficult for me. I find it extremely difficult to sit in front of the computer. I need one-to-one interactions. There are children who have told me I need one-to-one. And then there is multiple disability. So for each one, I'm going to give you, an example or a person whom I actually worked with. So there was a child who was diagnosed with autism. At the same time, the child had seizures. So he used to have seizures every once in 15 days. More often, the seizures we actually saw that happened during the full moon or the new moon. So we used to be very cautious during these days, especially, and we would see that. So the child with autism had multiple disabilities as well, a different disability. Next slide, please. Yeah, so now what I said was what brings us here, and then why we are talking about it, because of us addressing what is there as which is required in the different ways. And now the next what I'm going to do is also how. Now as I'm sharing this slide, what I'm using is probably many of you have come up with. Tony Buzan's mind maps. In education, in my center, I have seen this work beautifully for children, especially children with learning difficulties. So what we do is we give mind maps like this and put in things with pictures. If you see that the phone that you're using or a smartphone that you use, as soon as you click a WhatsApp, you will see an icon. You see there is a Google Chrome, there is an icon, and again with a lot of different colors. Tony Buzan, a person who introduced mind maps, did a lot of study, and he saw that the straight lines and especially blue and black are the ones which the child finds it boring. And the tendency is also for us to go into a hypnotic state as we read lines. Now, if you see, or probably as students, when you're preparing for your exam, this might have happened to you, that you're reading lines, and the tendency is for you to, suddenly fall asleep. The reason is because, just one sec, do not share the slide, please. I'll let you know. Yeah, so the tendency for us is to fall asleep. The reason being that your mind goes into a hypnotic state as you do that. It's very similar to something like driving. You continuously drive. That's one of the reasons why people say do not do night driving, right? Because you just keep looking at a straight line and that goes into a hypnotic state. The tendency that happens for children who continuously read is also this. So Tony Buzan came up with this. And one of the things which has worked beautifully is doing a mind map like this. 3 branches or not more than extra another 2 branches is what I would say, because I have seen some mind maps with fully cluttered. Children, again, mainly do not like too much information. That's also one of the major things in national education policies. How much information is it that you can give a child? I practice in my school something called as NIOS, National Institute of Open Schooling. So one child looked into the chapters, and yesterday he asked me a question. Ma'am, CBSE has 15 chapters. NIOS has 32 chapters. This is so unfair to me, ma'am. And an angry smiley face. All I did was I sent a smiley and I said, have you gone through the CBSE books? Yes, NIOS might have a vast chapters. Believe me that the way it has been simplified is much more. And that's one of the major things where the NCERT and the CBSE is working, where the curriculum and the content comes down. Okay. Sorry about it. Yes, just give me a minute. I'll just connect. Okay. One more thing is that I'm out in the open. There might be suddenly, if my dogs see a stranger, they suddenly have a tendency to start barking. There might be a loud noise. I'll mute only for a few seconds and then they'll be fine. All right. So now we come to the how of it. Yeah. Kavana, if the dogs start barking, please silence them. Yes. Thank you. Right? Now, the how comes first and foremost being able to recognize in what we do the developmental milestones. Next slide, please. Probably, or you might have assessments. Probably you will learn how to recognize the developmental milestones. And I don't know whether the person who took the last class told you about it. Very easy. That first and foremost, the child we have in special educators called as 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10 and 12. Yeah. So 2 is looking at the lips. So the child by age of 2 months, usually the child does it by 1 month, looks at you and smiles. The next is 4. By age of 4 months, the neck should be fine for the child. By the age of 6 months, the child is able to turn over. By the age of 8 months, sit. By the age of 10 months, stand with support. And by the age of 12 months, start walking, usually 1 year birthday time. Anytime these developmental milestones are delayed, the child's development is delayed. I have a 16-year-old who just completed 10th standard and has an issue with speaking. One of the things when I went back and saw where, when we took an assessment, we saw it was because he was an 8th month born, when the child was born 8th month. Now, what the parent did was they said, anyway, he was born in August. Is there a way that we can put the child in May? And back then it was easier. I think now it's more computerized and it's not easy. Change the date to May so that he can get into schools. They did not know that the first and foremost, the child was an 8th month born. And finally, the child, that slowly added up to a pressure in the child. So this is one of the things which happened to the child. And even now, the child struggling with the language and struggling with certain subjects. Now, when a developmental milestone is delayed, the child will take time. And we need to give the child that development. As teachers, if you can recognize this, that there might be a delay in developmental milestones, hopefully if you can get assessments, and that's something which is coming in again in the national education policy, where continuously the assessments will come in, where you will see what is the requirement for the child. So these are some of the things which are coming in. That's also one reason why they're saying not before 4 years or 6 years the child will get into the primary school. That's also something that they're focusing on. So global developmental delay is something that we call, which might be the cause. Probably sometimes it's because of birth, sometimes just because the child took some time during labor to be born and had a little bit of time when he did not or she did not get oxygen during that time. So that also affects the developmental milestones. Now, the next slide, please. So we'll go through each one of it. You know of visual impairment and hearing impairment. Many times I'll also tell you a little bit about them, that these are places where already we have schools, we already have the script ready. And since the intellectual disability is not an issue, I have seen children with a visual impairment or partial visual impairment pick it up. I told you I visited the Chamarajnagar district, right? Now there, what happened was the child was a child who could not write E. And what I did was, I realized that the child was looking into a textbook, and you know the font in the textbook, even the bigger one, E. All I did is split paper, write big, and then I showed it. Within 5, it was just an assessment I went to. Within 5-10 minutes, he knew to which he had not learned for the past 3 months that he was in school. So it was just a understanding that this child needed big font. That's it. So children with visual impairment, children with hearing impairment, because of their because they're intellectually, they are able to catch when taught in the right way. Now, children with autism, there is a beautiful series called The Good Doctor. This is from that. This is a character, Sean Murphy from Good Doctor. If you want to learn more about autism, there is another show called Atypical as well. Please watch it. It's a joy. I love to watch the way the child copes. Children with autism is basically now comes under the communication disorder. They have an anxiety. They are socially impaired to communicate. So sometimes you will not know what is happening. A child with autism, one of the first ways that you can recognize a child with autism is by the age of 2 months or 3 months. Also, the child does not meet the eye to communicate. Looking and meeting the parent's eye and smiling is very important because everything is modeled. So that's one of the reasons the language will be impaired. The child, beautifully, you can recognize a child with autism because left alone, child wants to be left alone, will sit alone, hates to be touched, does not like to be touched. The touch has to come by himself or herself. Sometimes I have had children with high functioning autism. We have. So those kind of children are children who will be amazing. Their brains, the memory is so sharp. I had a child whom I just have to tell 1999, what date was 2nd of July. And he would say, he would just think like this for a few minutes and say, it's a Friday. Beautiful movies are there. My Name is Khan is about more of Asperger's syndrome. Barfi, I think Priyanka Chopra plays the role of a child with autism. Now, children need a one-to-one here, understanding what they require, communicating with them, asking them to communicate. Since language is not developed, there are times when they think that they have already told you the answer. So so children with autism are also people who are stickler to rules. They need structure, they need a particular person, and you will see children working like that. There are children who have completed their 10th, 12th, and even degree. There are also certain software companies who work with autism. They are amazing with computers. Computers does not require interaction other than a one-to-one graphic user interface, right? So they do extremely well when the software and programs are designed like that, when education comes to that level. Absolutely egocentric, and sometimes they require completely neutral understanding and giving them a structure. You require an individual education program for children with autism. Next, they are great with singers. They are great with singing. They're learning from their hearing is extremely acute. They will hear a noise much before we hear it, because that's the kind, highly sensory there. So that's the children with autism. Next slide, please. Yes, these are children with intellectual disabilities. Earlier, we used to call it mental retardation. Now, according to DSM-4, DSM-5, they come children whoever, either because of genetics. The child whom I'm showing is a Down syndrome child, when the mother has an XXY. Or where the child is born with an XXY, the mother's chromosome gets attached. So the child with one is Down syndrome. Sometimes it can also be because of an head injury, sometimes birth, issues with birth, cerebral palsy. All these come under where the intellectually the IQ doesn't develop according to the age. IQ has to be between 90 to 110. So usually the teachers or people ask them to go in for an IQ test. Usually children with these disabilities, what I have seen, IQ is between 70 to 80, sometimes 60, 65. So these are the children who come under these. Many will be great energy they have. So they need a lot of physical activity. They are sometimes restless. So they need a lot of great with physical activity. There are so many new organizations opened. I think in Tamil Nadu, in Chennai, I think you have Avin, which I think works with children with intellectual disabilities. So they work and they have, organizations where they're developing skills for children with intellectual disabilities. Usually the memory is limited. So there are ways that you will have to design tests. You'll have to weigh in the education has to be more of recognizing, and more of multiple choice questions. These are the kind of things very easily you can recognize. Next slide, please. Yeah. Next is, this is SLD. I'm sorry, there is a difference. That is specific learning difficulty. So what they showed, many of you must have watched the movie Tare Zameen Par of Ishan Awasthi. And this is one of my favorite, disabilities I'd love to talk about, because you don't see them disabled at all. You see them with high intelligence. They find it difficult to tell you that this is what is going on. We call SLD as um, uh, basically as a hidden disorder. You will not see. Only when you see the writing, you might see a difference. You might also see sometimes what might happen is that you will see a spelling which is missing, or the same thing like availability will be written as AVLIBILITY, somewhere else AVALIBATY, sometimes only. So that way is something that you recognize. One of the first ways you recognize in education is mainly, most of the time, it's language that they find difficult. Reading, writing. So in language, you have skills, right? As teachers, you will know, learn LSRW skills. Reading and writing will be a main issue. Recall also. Amel Madi Paile, please. So reading and writing will be a main issue. Recall will be a main issue. They remember, or they will tell you, sometimes they cannot write. You will see many children you will come across as you train with children with, and one of the major things that the parents would come and say, he is so smart, give him the computer, give him the mobile, he knows how to do it. He takes out the radio, he repairs it. But when it comes to studies, he doesn't do it. Probably he is lazy. It's not laziness. They find it difficult to communicate that I have a problem. There are times with his writing you can come to know. Some people find it difficult to communicate. So education will have to be very, the same big answer in social studies has to be given in breakups. And once the child learns, the child will put in their own questions. I would love to tell you how they used to use their intelligence. I had a child who was pretty poor in language. He just could not understand Kannada. So in his 8th standard, he was asked to make sentences. Okay, so what he said he did in this was, I will put it in Hindi first. So he had a sentence as called as probably Vyaktitva. So now he had to write that, and he wrote 5 sentences saying that, मैं टीचर से पूछा व्यक्तित्व का अर्थ क्या है. So there was the next sentence, and he said, मैं टीचर से पूछा इसका अर्थ क्या है. He made 5 sentences saying that. So he came and told, you know what, ma'am, I had no idea what it was, but I made sentences. This is the way their mind works. Amazingly sharp. Sometimes you will have ADHD accompanying. You will have specifically bright students, not attentive in class, disturbing your class. So these are children where you can see that they have attention deficit, sometimes hyperactive disorder. These are all the deficit things come. ADD. These are children which, as soon as they speak to you, or you're listening or you're talking to them and there is a noise, they look like this. And usually as teachers, we say, pay attention, rather than looking at what might be happening to the child. What happens for them is, in our brain, we have crossover of left to right, right to left. And so you can hear probably the birds, you can hear all the other noises around, but you are fine in listening to me. Unfortunately, a child with attention deficit disorder or ADHD will not be able to tell you this. And since, assessments also are very difficult, and parents will be under denial. As soon as you say assessment, their antenna will go up. So, it's going to be a huge challenge as teachers for you in addressing children like this. But for the child, what is happening is the crossing over is not happening. Directly, the audio sensory are meeting. And sometimes, like what did we say in the wiring, there is an input, storage, output might be great for us. For them, there is an input and there is an issue with output. How much output I want to give, I have no idea. As an 8th standard child, I don't know how much you want me to write. I have understood, I'm telling you these. And they'll give you specific. In education, they'll just give you short answers. Elaborate is not something they will be able to. They need the skills to help them learn these. Next, please. Next slide, please. Yeah. So the next is multiple disabilities. I'm sure probably many of you might recognize this. It's a quiz. If you want, you can actually, if you know, you can actually just write the name. Who is this person whom I am sharing the, and a great inspirer in education. So you can actually ask me that question or write. So I will, next slide.
Chat box now, and then people can respond. Ravinder, is it possible to enable the
It is enabled, ma'am. Enabled it.
It is enabled. All right. So you can actually respond to it if you want to, and if you can see who this person is. Yeah. Right, I'll just see the chat. Oh, yes, beautiful. Great, right. Right, Shiksha. So that is what, she is Helen Keller. And yes, you can go back to the next slide as well. Yeah, you can go to the next slide. Yes, that's Helen Keller, yes. Yeah, so that's what she said. And she is one of the major persons, as you can see, how to teach is, if you can teach a child like Helen Keller as educators, that will be the main skill that you have learned as teachers, where you can make her write something like this. Life is either an adventure, a daring adventure, or nothing. So next slide, please. Yeah, this is also something she said. The best and the most beautiful things in the world cannot be seen or even touched. They must be felt in the heart, with the heart. If we can make this as a part of our education and the way we contribute. So that is one of the things. Next one, please. Next slide. Yes. So what we need, as I'm looking at, is I've just given PIES. Anyone can tell me what are PIES, which is something as teachers you'll have to include this. Yes, and you can post your questions because yes, in another 10-15 minutes, I will complete my sharing. What I have seen is, anybody can tell me what PIES is? Any one person who can just post what are the PIES of development, areas of development you might have learned? Anyone? So PIES stands for the PIES area of development, the physical development, intellectual development, emotional development. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Said. And social development. So these are the areas, and any one of these areas in the development of the child is affected, the other areas get affected. And over the 24 years that I have worked, I have seen each one contributing to the other. Whenever children come to me, they come, or parents bring them to me saying that, yes, school mein acha nahi kar raha hai, theek se nahi pad raha hai. So that's one of the first things children used to come to me as coming for a tuition is something that they used to come. And then that's where I would recognize a continuous thing with spellings. Now, what's happening because the child is not fine with spellings is that what happens is the child is probably sometimes kept back during the PT period and sit and complete notes, complete things because they're slow in writing. So this happens, and because of this, as this is affected. Next, emotionally they feel hurt. I have had traumas that I have worked with. Many of my children, when they watch Tare Zameen Par, I thought, wow, finally the whole world will come to know about specific learning disabilities. Now the whole things will be much better. And I asked my 15-year-olds, my 14-year-olds, they were just studying in 8th standard, 9th standard. And they said, after they watched the movie, I said, how did you like the movie? I'm sure you would have related to it. They said, I don't want to talk about it. There were times they went into depression for 2 or 3 days because they realized the pain, the trauma that they went through was real. That they said, I'm not the only one who suffers, and they could, actually relate, and they relived the trauma that they went through. So emotionally they are affected. Many children you will meet, especially if you're taking 8th and 9th standard, severe anger. You will see probably sometimes they get into fights. There are times, because all the time they say, every time I know that I'm going to fail and I'm going to make my mother sad, I'm going to make my father sad. I don't want to hear the teachers scolding my mother or father. And I see my mother of coming back. I used to work with many children who are going to schools. My mother does not know how to speak English. And she would come to the parent-teacher meeting, and there would be things, can any pies are related? Can be any chance is related? Absolutely, yes, it is related. That's one of the things, again, which has taken for, yes, the pies development.
Questions later. There's post.
Yes.
You could take them one two at a time.
I will do that. I will take the questions later. I will just complete this. So looking at the pies as teachers will become very, very important. You will see some children not mingling or not going with their children. I had certain children come and talk that we are in a school. Bangalore is a place where wonderful schools have come up. So there was a school where they had only 11 children or 12 children. And the parents sent them there. Now, the child would come and say, I am not doing well in studies. So there is another girl. We cannot go and be with the other children. They don't include me there. Peer pressure is intense for them. And what is an expectation is very intense. And there are parents, I've heard parents telling their children, don't sit next to the child who is poor in studies. In fact, in education, this is something that I have done as a buddy system, where in our school, what we do is every other person who's finding it easy to learn this will teach the other child. This child who's sitting next to that person will teach the other child. Okay, you're going to take over. You're going to take over. What happens is, by then, what happens is that person reads and learns that and learns from that. Not only is it's like a symbiotic relationship, the other child is finding it and getting more and more confidence about it. Then, so most of the time it is by demonstration. I think you probably will do this more. You have a class on experiential education also. So you will learn more that when a child actually does it, when you allow the child to actually experience it and demonstrate it and learn and teach another child, 80% of the learning happens that way. So that's a wonderful thing to have even in social development. So just because of one academic, sometimes physically the child will not go out and play, intellectual development is affected, emotional development is affected, and social development is affected. Yeah. So this is one of the things, excuse me, just one. All right. Okay. So, yeah. Next. Yeah. So each one is affected. Then, any one area is affected, everything gets affected. I have had a child who came to know that he was adopted and suddenly gave up on everything for 2 or 3 years. The parents did not know what was happening. There was, it was a huge emotional trauma for the child. Children, even in 7th and 8th, when change of schools, which you will see a lot, which will come in during pandemic, because situations have changed, financial situations have changed. So you will see a lot happening. And when that happens in 7th, 8th, 9th standard, children go through depression. Children have spoken to me about suicides at age of, 13 and 14-year-olds. At 7th and 8th, they have said, I did not get right marks. I did not want to go back to my go back home. So each one is interlinked to the other, looking into how you will design your lessons according to the PIE's area of development. Especially now when you're, during taking classes, you can just say, hey, let's just do one exercise. Let's do a brain gym exercise. And please do this to me if you can see me. Shibani, you can see me, right? Yeah. So a very quick exercise. I learned this through something called as an image reading. It's an NLP technique, which ensures the whole brain, the right side and the left hemisphere develops. I learned this around 20 years back. Ever since I have practiced that. I'm left-handed and I was very bad in math. I was amazing in English. All right. Amazing, because I could make out my right area of my brain is pretty well developed. Right. But then left side. So I could not understand science. I could not understand math. And after that, I had a huge, challenge of teaching children in 6th with math, 7th ICSE math. This child would go to 8th standard and say, no, I want Kavitha ma'am only to teach. So as I went, I learned it. And during that time, I did these developments. Yeah. So this is one. If you know, they're very easy. You start off class and say, hey, guys, let's do an exercise. And this is one, which all of you can do together, fist tapping. The next is cross crawls. Hey guys, tap your knees. Yeah. Yeah. And then you do this. This is 2, this is 1, this is 1, this is 2. Make 2 ones, 2s. These are, children enjoy this. These are just physical 5-minute lectures where you do this. The child gets involved and immediately starts. So these are all small things that you can include in your activities. All right. So doing these, and there is also something, taking 2 pens and writing 8s. You can do this with all your children, your nephews, your nieces, because the person who taught me said, Kavitha, you're an educator, right? I'm teaching this for free. The person did a 2-day workshop, which cost him 1,25,000 back then, just to learn these exercises. And he said, I want you to teach this to all. And today I'm addressing the educators. Please do this exercise. What happened to me personally, I've been doing these exercises of doing the 8 and this. What happened to me is there was a whole brain. These are called whole brain methods of development. Not much we use in India. Some probably you have with the institutions where they say brain gym and teaching these. When you do these, you are activating both sides of the brain. Just writing 8 like this, even in the air. And what happened to me personally was I had a scooty back then, and scooty comes with 2 keys, right? I have lost 4 sets of keys, but ever since I did brain gym, not 1 key have I lost ever since then, because something happened to the memory area. Next slide, please. Yes. Yeah, something happened to the memory area. So there are many things which are coming in of how our brains work and how the neural signals and neural pathways work. One of the things I also attended a work with, this is what I just showed you, is whole brain development. Also, one more thing which I attended also was a lecture. Actually, I attended a workshop by a person from Canada, where they've seen how 2 children being multilingual, learning in Kannada or Hindi first, and then learning in English language, how that ensures different areas of the brain works. That's one of the reasons, if you see many of our parents, our teachers, probably many of us who did and learned the vernacular medium, either the Hindi medium earlier and then went to English, picked up English so well. You can't even make out, okay, there's a person, this person did not study English earlier. And they say the way the development and the brain happens when you learn two areas is completely different. There has been studies conducted where an American who did not have languages, how the child did English, an American student, and how a Mexican child who learned Spanish first and then did how their brain worked. In fact, the Mexican child did much better in English because they had learned more. So these are different areas. I've tried to give you all in whatever I have learned, because I learned from a lot of mentors. I had many mentors from whom I learned. And being a learner is one of the major things as a teacher. Richard Bach, I read a book called Illusions, and Richard Bach says in his book, we are all learners, doers, and teachers. So that's what it is about. I would like to end with a quote. Yes, next slide, please. This is another educator, A.J. Giuliani. I would invite you to, read more about him. Our job as teachers is not to prepare kids for something. Our job is to help kids learn to prepare themselves for anything. That is going to be the 21st century skills that they're going to need. And all the best to all of you. I thank you all so much for this opportunity. Ready for any questions that you would like to ask? Next slide. I think I have my contact number and my email. You can take it down later. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that. That was wonderful. Also, because we did have a talk on some of the aspects that you covered, but yours comes from a place of practice and not just theory. So that is what I think made the talk very interesting, and we need to do it at a different level, I think. Because there are many questions coming in, many compliments coming in as well. Lovely
Thank you.
how knowledgeable and informative. I'll come to the questions in a bit, and in the meantime, I'm requesting other participants also to post questions in the chat box, please.
Yes,
I would
yes.
like to ask you a couple of things. One is, that we most of us are teachers at the college level. So by the time the students come to the college, the education in a college happens very differently. Say that we are past the time when we are assessing whether they have a learning disability, etc.
Right. I'll just change my place. I just see a lot of light. That's why. Yeah. Please tell me. Yeah.
So, what can we do as educators at this level? How do we kind of related? This is from personal experience. A couple of years back, this is I think for the first time. I think Delhi University allowed students with intellectual disabilities to apply under the PWD quota, and we had somebody I teach English, so I had somebody English on his course who belonged to the autism spectrum disorder. Okay, it was difficult, as a teacher to sort of to interact with him, because he did not have the skills to interact with somebody, and we have large classes. It's not like a special education school where you have just 5 or 10 students. We have classes from anything between 45 to more students. So it was difficult to interact, and I felt that whenever actually I would approach him and try to speak to him just to make him comfortable, what I was achieving was the opposite. Okay, he would be very self-conscious, etc. And because I knew about that he had a certain disability, and I was actually trying to sort of talk to him a little bit more, and the opposite, it came to a pass where he would see me in the parking and he would run away, actually. So my question is that, number one is, at the college level where we have to deal with a huge number of students, what can we do as educators, to make it easy? And how do we sort of teach? What
Right.
do we do as educators to make them more
Yeah,
comfortable, to make our teachers more accessible to them?
correct. Yes.
Is my question to you.
Yes, one of the things, Shibani, is that there has to be an awareness and sensitization about it, saying that you are not alone. And there has to be a way where you have groups which are formed. In fact, there are many, there are, even with your clubhouse nowadays, you will see an ADHD group, a dyslexic group, and people actually talking about it. Now, unfortunately, this which has to be done at a level, initially, as I saw many of the questions also, which said, how can you do it at an early age? Saying that this is like a disorder, like if I have a toothache or if, I have cavities, it's just like that I'm born with it and then I have to live with it because my parents also had it. It's genetic. SLD is genetic. They have seen that autism might have a genetic gene to it. There are people who are really talking about it. And so many things that we are born with. In fact, they say that every 1 out of 4 children has a learning difficulty. That's the kind of a ratio we are talking about. I have 4 children. I see that one of my children cannot learn and cannot read and says, I cannot settle for a long time. So these are things, first and foremost, is acceptance and inclusion coming in. And there is a way that you can recognize, unfortunately, especially in SLD, you will mainly come across these 3, what I spoke about more, of specific learning difficulties that they have. Yes, there are people giving specific training. In fact, just to talk about SLDs and what exactly happens, learning difficulties, I require at least a 2.5 to 3 hour session. So my major thing is, my major goal is to help out, and anywhere that you want to call me and give or talk about this, I will, because mine is more out of experience. I first worked with children and then did my course because it demanded that I do the course. I started having different difficulties, and I did my learning difficulty course. But then I had children with intellectual difficulties, mental retardation, autism. Children would sit in front of me and say, I want only that particular map. So then I had to do a course where I did my master's in child mental health, where I could help everyone out. So this is basically one of the major things is you can recognize by their content. You can recognize, you will either way correct books, right? You'll recognize by their handwriting. You will recognize that somewhere it is not only a language problem that they have the problem in actually forming sentences. So many things, especially for the college students, let's say that you are dealing with right now, will be majorly that you'll have to give them coping skills. How is it that you do better? You have come till here. How is it that I can help you cope? You need, usually there has to be a place or a space done as a safe space. Many places do have counselors, or a college might have. Probably they will say that you go to the counselor only when you have a problem. If that can be made as a subject where all of us have a problem, all of us in pandemic are having our own problems, can we have a period or a specific day where everyone gets involved, where then it is a safe space for people to say, yes, I have this, I have recognized this, I have suffered from this, and then do anything about it. But that's a huge way that we can help out each other. That's a wonderful way. And like I said, there are ways that only through looking at a text that you can make out what is happening with the child. Yeah.
Now, I think we'll move on and take some questions because we have time only till 1 o'clock.
Yes, we will.
So,
right. Yes.
Initial questions, I cannot see them in my chat box. The questions which were posed earlier, can somebody help me with that? Let me begin with the questions that I can see. Somebody has asked, Vijeta Ghosh Guha asked, is there any specific training available for teachers to deal with students with learning difficulties?
Yes, there are trainings which are, people are more and more coming up with that. There is something called as a certificate course being offered by certain places where people do this. There is also a 10-month course that you can do for learning difficulties. There are many organizations. You just have to go around and see if there is a learning difficulty school or a school with special needs only for learning difficulty, and they usually have a 2 months. Earlier it was only a parent course, then it became a teacher's course. Now you have many more where you can actually do work more with it. In fact, as such, there is no course, but again, like I said, this is something in a 2-hour or a 3-hour lecture is also something where you call a person who is a special educator and who has worked with that, and you can learn it all within a matter of 2 or 3 hours. How to recognize, how to see through handwriting. Here, unfortunately, there is no if had more, I could actually show you specimens of the handwriting and things which I have collected, the scripts which I have collected. Probably more, anybody who's interested more, I can always share it with you. Yes. Any other question?
Yes. Question from Shanti Bhushan. Ma'am, what is more important for a special needs student, learning or unlearning?
All right. It's a wonderful question. I would say both learning and unlearning. First and foremost, unlearning that you have a deficit. Accepting that you have a deficit like anyone else, that people don't talk about it. And so that is one of the things. Learning to cope with the skills required. The person just said that, the 25-year-old who had learning difficulties, when they searched for a groom, the mother said, you've already gone to college. Don't tell them that you were in a special school. She got divorced in 2 months because she had come to me saying, ma'am, they're asking me, the questions they ask are like, you have no answers. Ma'am, they're asking me to, live a life with him, and I have to start off with a lie, is a question that they asked me. And the major thing is, she says, even now when I want to cross the road, I'm afraid. Ishan Avasti in that, Tare Zameen Par will still have issues. Not that, the mentor is there and now he knows to learn. How to cope, the coping skills, and you as a teacher being there for them when they need. And being available is what is required.
Dr. Gopal Kumar has a question which is in Hindi. I will translate it to the best.
Yes, I understood. I think his question of whether there are two different parts of the brain or the whole brain, right?
Yes. I think he's also talking about inferiority complex.
Yes.
And whether sort of, how does one help one to overcome with this kind of inferiority complex?
Oh, yes. So now one of the things, what has happened is, one is that we have the right brain, right hemisphere, left hemisphere. We have seen certain areas work here, certain areas work here. For example, I will just give you one small thing which happens in our culture. One was use your right hand, use your right hand, use your right hand. And if you see, we had many mathematicians, many, scientists and all of that. The tendency is that the left starts developing more. It's very easy for you to start developing. Your whole brain is, if you're left-handed, start doing things with your right hand. If you're right-handed, start doing with your left hand. It's as simple as that, and doing these. And at the same time, we are using both the areas of the brain. There are different areas which work together. And the thing is, when you're doing this, you're activating the nerves right here. Even just doing this tapping, there's a corpus callosum. There are a bundle of nerves which come. You're just activating all these through different areas. And that is one of the things. It comes from somewhere in PIES, the inferiority complex. The next question that you asked comes because somewhere I work a lot on that, which is not mentioned in PIES, is the area which I specifically work with is self-esteem. We might be great as, the things that we have achieved, but when we compare as, especially in the East, we compare with the West, the self-esteem issue is very, very a huge issue. One of the major things it comes with is two different ways of parenting. My father was probably an authoritative parent who said, listen to me and do this. My mother was like, it's okay, permissive parenting. When parentings are two different ways, there is an issue with a clash of self-esteem. Somewhere within us, there is one small little thing where we feel we are not good enough, the bottom line. And just working with, I'm not good enough, I'm fine the way I am. That's one of the major reasons why, you can see my website also called Compassionate Learning. I have opened, where treating ourselves with compassion, it's okay. However I am as a teacher, it's okay. And you will see so much of a difference. Please give your time, all of you, in your great work that you're doing. A very special person whom no one else will give time to, the person sitting in your chair, you. And when you give that time and compassion to yourself, you'll be great at the work that you're doing. Any other questions, please?
Yes, Shikha Srivastav is asking, how does nutrition affect the intellectual and emotional health, if it does? Yeah.
Yes, very much. Proper nutrition is extremely important for proper brain development. That is one of the things that we've seen. And I think you can actually look at your emotional and what health did she ask?
Emotional and intellectual health.
Emotional and intellectual health, yes. There are, and which has been there, it is there even in our the earlier sciences of Ayurveda, and also in, which is something people are talking about as we are going more and more to organic food, the right way of living, the vegan diet. Everywhere they're talking about nutrition. One is, we have already seen in children who do not have nutrition, physical development is not there. You don't have iron enough in your body, the tendency is to feel tired. So you won't be able to concentrate in class. So when the child is not being able to intellectually, definitely, that's one of the main reasons why the primary sectors and Anganwadis and all of them are looking at the right nutrition. Also, you just see, the day you order from McDonald's, or you go and have a pizza or a burger, you'll feel so full in the stomach. Oh, yum to our beautiful taste buds. But after some time, you feel lethargic. There are those kinds of foods, the popcorns, the French fries. You yourself will feel lethargic. The same day, let's say I have done all these. The day I start off with an apple or a salad, I'm feeling fresh in my gut. There is something. So definitely there is a difference in what you do. There's definitely these things add on antioxidants, which we are talking about a lot nowadays. I have a great nutritionist friend. So we had gone, because of my, in the farm, because I have some time now, we started putting these fruit trees and all, and he would go and show and say, that's high in antioxidant, that's high. And so we, as we went to the nursery, we were plucking things. So always.
Is there a problem with the, she's frozen, I think? Is it at my end, or is she frozen?
I think she disconnected.
Let's just wait for 2 minutes for her to join, hopefully. Another question. I've lost the chat because I think I disconnected for a minute from my phone. But there was
Okay.
a question about a child who doesn't read. Okay, finds it difficult to read, finds it difficult to retain, etc. What he is reading, can't even read a full sentence completely. What does one do as a teacher with such children?
Milestones in development. When there is the child not able to read, which means something might be wrong in the basics. Take your time, go to slow motion mode. So go back to the level he or she finds easy. So start with, okay, let's just play a game. Okay, what is A, B, C? See what the recognition of letters is, or just say, let's just say the fat cat sat on the mat. Repeat it and write it. And then you slowly increase the level to there is, so fat cat is just, 3-letter word. Okay, my feet is on the mat. So the 4-letter word came in. So just see where the child is having a difficulty. So sometimes the difficulty is forming sentences. There are very beautiful, very simple techniques. Like I said, these are things very easily available. And, Wonderful. Within a couple of hours, we can do that. So any day you can contact me and I will help you with it. How to help the child. Start with the smaller books. First, second, third standard books are much easier, and start with them.
Yeah, I think Shikha had a question. Is PIES a scientifically accepted term or is it just an abbreviation?
It's an abbreviation which all psychologists follow. PIES is the short form for physical, intellectual, emotional, and social development. They also, that's the new method of studying how you can have the PIES model, physical PIES. They say for a whole development of the child, you require physical, intellectual, and emotional and social development. Anyone gets affected, the others are affected. Sometimes divorces, sometimes problems at home, social issues, all these affects the child in different ways. Yeah.
A couple of questions just to wind up. One is, the evaluation mode for a child with special needs, it needs to be different, right? Again, I'm speaking from the perspective of a college, a teacher.
Yes.
How does one, do we then need to, because what you talked about, for example, the children would, their books need to be books whereby the information is given in nuggets, they are not long paragraphs, etc.
Right.
Now we have
Right.
standard books for all college
Correct.
students. There are no books available for those with special needs. Even the evaluation model for those with physical disabilities, we do sort of provide, for example, somebody
Right.
who's visually challenged, you have somebody who, a scribe, okay, or
Right.
maybe an R extra, etc. Those are.
Yes.
But somebody, especially with intellectual disabilities, do we need to work towards books as well as an evaluation model for those who are at the college level?
Yeah. At the college level, you need to give them coping skills. They'll require just a few classes of saying that, listen, this is where your writing is and this is what is expected. Because finally, they need to meet a standard, right? Finally, what we are talking about is inclusive education. Include them in whatever you're doing. One education for all. So when you look at the books, and it's definitely difficult for you to change the textbooks. That's already the NCERT has a Herculean task changing the 1st to 10th textbook, right? Finally, it is how you integrate them to this. They learn and they can master books. They'll talk to you about books. When they learn the skill, they become avid readers. Children who are not able to read and write, there is a way that you teach them skill. My brother had dyslexia. And when I used to teach the child, at that time, he would say, cover one eye, take a paper, put it in this, and then, ask them to read like this, cover the other eye and read the same word. Immediately it was solved. And that was something he figured out by himself, or he learned somewhere. He became a great reader of books. He read more of self-help books, and I was into novels and stories and fairy tales. So that's the way. Once you give them the mechanism and once you give them the tool, they will learn and grasp. There are times when they're seeking help and they don't know where to reach out. Yeah.
So another question is that, again, some of these students would possibly come from schools which are for special needs children. When they come to a college, the group is, of course, a much more diverse group. How do we sensitize the others vis-a-vis the child with special needs? How do I sensitize the other students to the needs of one with special needs?
So one of the first things which requires is, like already you have a rule in your college after you saw what happens with bullying, and probably a very new rule coming with gender harassment and all of this. Now, in the same way, you need to have an orientation session of saying that this is what it is, that there is no discrimination and we will have children and inclusive education. Just on what inclusive education is and how being compassionate, probably, a session on compassion or just inclusive education, where this is a college that is open for all, or some kind of nowadays we do have different programs like yoga program, because we know these, right, included. So like that, having that will ensure, especially if you have something on emotional health, having a session or something where, okay, your emotion matters, your emotional health matters. You have a place where you can reach out to. That's going to be a huge thing, because people will find it difficult now, to socialize or get into gatherings. Yeah, these are also the new things that you will face after 1.5 years, almost 2 years of, starting off college after a closure. So definitely, we are here for you, and you can reach out to us. That's something that you can do, and have a network, a wonderful network of many, many counselors, lay counselors, and, people who are willing out there to help out. And they have somebody, they can reach out to. That's something we can do. Yes.
Just last question to end the session with. I'm sure at times it must also be frustrating and traumatic as an educator, because and there might be challenge that you feel overwhelmed by, etc. How do you
Right.
deal with that as an educator?
Yeah. So one of the things I would do as an educator is that there are times when you work so much. There are times, especially now, I will have around 3 to 4 students at the same time talking to them. I don't have more than 3 or 4 in my class, every class which I take, because I have to pay individual attention to each one of them. So there are times when what I'll have to first be aware of is how I am, or as you enter the mood in your class, that you will know that the others will grasp your mood unconsciously. So it's one of the major things is I need to set up. If I have to be accepted, I'll have to be accepting. If I have to want the children to have an exciting class, I have to be exciting and excited. I can't, say that it's you as students, you need to learn. So catching myself when I'm having that mood, something's not all right. Let me first set myself. Today, I'm not in a mood to take class, or just give me 10 minutes. Let me just set myself right. And just doing a breathing exercise, or just a grounding, and saying, hey, now I'm just going to go in. So many times they can sense what you are. Okay. Yeah. So like, I think Vishwas Parchure, who will be coming in, he will be talking more about this, that, we teach what we know. Okay. And people learn from who we are, basically. So that's the unconsciously we teach who we are. So consciously we teach what we know. So he'll tell you more about it. Lovely. There were some people who were asking for my number, Shibani. If you can share that on the chat, it will be great. Yeah.
What I will do is there's a WhatsApp group for all the participants. I will ask
Yes.
somebody to post your email as your number in the group so that
Yes.
we can all have access to it and they can
Sure.
contact you for further
Great.
talks or any questions or queries that they have.
Great.
So I think with that, if we don't have any more questions, I think we can, end the session with that. Thank you
Great.
very much for joining us. Thank you
Sure.
very much for this very, very sort of, for sharing your experience, because, I mean, that
Thank
is,
you.
I think, we talk enough about special needs and special needs education, but, somebody who
Right.
engages with this, on a daily basis, I think that
Yes.
is very, very special. So thank you very
Right.
much. And we hope to have you back some other time as well. And to
Absolutely. Anytime, anywhere you need, because this is the need of the day,
absolutely.
physical, especially intellectual and emotional. And I'll be willing to help anytime. Yeah. Sure.
Thank you very
Okay.
much. Thank you to all
Sure.
the participants. And we will
Thank you.
join at 1:30 for the next session.